The hangar was in a frenzy as the pilots prepared for the biggest starship race in the galaxy. Crews rushed around the sleek, gleaming vessels, running final checks and making last-minute adjustments. The sounds of machinery and chatter was deafening. In the midst of the chaos, two figures stood out: a human and an alien, both looking thoroughly out of place. Dan Reese was a young human in his mid-20s, with a lanky frame and a mop of unruly brown hair. He had always been a bit of an oddball, more comfortable tinkering with engines than making small talk at social events. His knowledge of starship mechanics was unparalleled, but his people skills left much to be desired. Standing next to him was Crixon, a Solarian pilot nearly twice Dan's age. The Solarians were a proud, warrior-like race known for their exceptional piloting skills. Crixon, however, was considered a pariah among his people. His flying style was unorthodox and unconventional, often resulting in crashed ships and angry outbursts from his superiors. He had been relegated to the outer rim, barely scraping by as a freelance cargo hauler. The two misfits had been paired up by chance, brought together by a shared desire to prove themselves in the prestigious Galactic Grand Prix. Against all odds, they had managed to cobble together a ship capable of competing in the race, a modified freighter they had painstakingly refitted and customized over the past several months. As the other pilots gave their sleek, high-performance racers a final once-over, Dan and Crixon's battered old freighter sat in the corner, drawing snickers and derisive laughter from the crowd. "Look at that rust bucket," sneered Xandor, the current champion and the favorite to win the race. "I give them 5 minutes before they're limping back to the pits with their tails between their legs." His teammates roared with laughter, earning nods of agreement from the other pilots. Dan clenched his fists, his face flushing with embarrassment and frustration. Crixon placed a callousing hand on his shoulder, his 4 eyes radiating a calm, reassuring presence. "Pay them no mind, human," he said in a low, rumbling voice. "They will be the ones with their tails between their legs when we cross the finish line first." Dan took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He knew Crixon was right. The naysayers had no idea what their ship was capable of. They had poured their hearts and souls into this machine, pushing it to the limits of its performance. And with Crixon's unorthodox yet brilliant piloting skills, they just might have a chance. The starting signal blared, and the racers took to the skies. Xandor and his team of elite pilots rocketed ahead, their sleek, state-of-the-art ships leaving a trail of exhaust in their wake. Dan and Crixon's freighter, however, sputtered and coughed as it slowly gained altitude, eliciting more jeers from the crowd. "Looks like the misfits are already falling behind," a spectator shouted, earning a round of laughter. Crixon's 4 eyes narrowed in concentration as he guided the freighter through the maze of ships, his hands moving with the fluid grace of a seasoned pilot. Dan monitored the ship's systems, making minor adjustments to maximize their performance. "All right, Crixon, we're good to go," he said, his voice laced with determination. "Let's show these guys what we're made of." Crixon nodded, his mandibles twitching in his Solarian grin. "Prepare yourself, human. This is going to be a wild ride." With a burst of acceleration, the freighter surged forward, quickly catching up to the main pack of racers. Xandor and his team watched in disbelief as the battered ship gained on them, its engines roaring with unexpected power. "What the?" Xandor exclaimed, his eyes widening. "How is that hunk of junk keeping up with us?" Dan couldn't help but grin as he saw the looks of shock and confusion on the other pilots' faces. "Told you we'd surprise them," he said, glancing over at Crixon. The Solarian pilot was in his element, his 4 eyes darting from one instrument to the next as he masterfully navigated the treacherous course. He threaded the freighter through the tight gaps between the other ships, his reflexes lightning fast and his instincts impeccable. As they approached the first sharp turn, Crixon's unorthodox flying style came into play. While the other pilots took the turn wide, hugging the outer edges of the course, Crixon pushed the freighter's thrusters to the limit, cutting a tight, inside line that left their rivals in the dust. The crowd erupted in a mix of cheers and bewildered murmurs as the misfit duo rocketed into the lead. Xandor and his team were momentarily stunned, but quickly regained their composure and began to give chase, their superior ships closing the gap with ease. "They're gaining on us," Dan shouted, his fingers flying over the ship's controls. Crixon's mandibles twitched with determination. "Not for long, human. Hang on tight." The freighter lurched forward, its engines straining to the breaking point as Crixon pushed it to its limits. Dan gritted his teeth, his knuckles turning white as he braced himself against the intense G-forces. The race became a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, with Xandor and his team relentlessly pursuing the battered freighter. But every time they seemed poised to overtake the leaders, Crixon would pull off another daring maneuver, weaving the ship through impossible gaps and taking turns at angles that defied the laws of physics. The spectators watched in awe, their initial laughter and derision long forgotten. The misfit duo had captured their imaginations, and they roared their approval with each narrow escape and daring pass. As they approached the final lap, Xandor's frustration boiled over. "Enough of this," he growled, his fingers flying over his ship's controls. "Time to put an end to this little fairy tale." His teammates followed his lead, their ships surging forward in a coordinated attack. They flanked the freighter on both sides, their powerful engines pushing them ever closer. "They're trying to box us," and Dan shouted, his eyes darting between the rapidly approaching ships. Crixon's mandibles twitched in a grim expression. "I know. Hold on, human. This is going to be close." The freighter rocketed forward, its engine strained to the limit as Crixon pulled off a series of impossible maneuvers, weaving and dodging the other ships with the grace of a dancer. Dan's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the distance between them and their pursuers dwindle, the other ships pressing in from all sides. Just as it seemed they were about to be swallowed up, Crixon spotted an opening, a narrow gap between two of the enemy ships. Without hesitation, he gunned the engines, pushing the freighter into the tight space. The crowd held its collective breath as the freighter seemed to defy the laws of physics, sliding through the gap with mere inches to spare. Xandor and his team, caught off guard by the daring move, were unable to react in time and found themselves slamming into each other in a spectacular crash. Dan let out a whoop of triumph as they shot across the finish line, the crowd erupting in thunderous cheers. Crixon's mandibles spread in a wide, Solarian grin as he brought the freighter to a gentle landing. As they disembarked, they were immediately surrounded by a throng of excited fans, all clamoring to congratulate them on their stunning victory. Xandor and his team, meanwhile, limped back to the pits, their ships in shambles, their pride thoroughly crushed. In the midst of the celebration, Dan and Crixon shared a look of mutual respect and understanding. They had defied the odds and proven themselves against the best pilots in the galaxy. And they had done it together, an unlikely duo who had forged an unbreakable bond through their shared passion for the thrill of the race. As the sun set over the gleaming spaceport, the two misfits raised a toast to their victory, knowing that this was only the beginning of their remarkable journey.